He's reported in the Herald Sun today. He's got really quite an agenda of issues in this state. I reckon it does a lot of good to sit down and look at somebody who's been living outside the country for a while, comes back regularly, but has a look at things. Hang on, what's going on in this place? Andrew Bogut, good morning.
Good to be here.
What are you up to? Why does this interest you?
I'm a proud Victorian, proud Australian. As much as people hate to hear it, I love this state. And that article that came out, I'm not saying that Victoria is not a great place to live, but when you love something enough, you should be able to criticise it and try to fix some of the problems that you see.
Well, how much time have you spent out of the country in the past 10 years or so?
I'm usually home in Australia for 3 to 4 months a year.
Yeah.
So people are always like, "Oh, you live in America." Well, I live here 3 or 4 months a year. 3 or 4 months a year. But I've lived in metropolises. I've lived in your San Francisco, your Los Angeles. I've lived in small town USA, Milwaukee. So I've seen, different varieties of what cities do well and what they do bad. And I think, it's just my opinion, but people listen to it, unfortunately, because I'm an athlete.
But when you're out of the country that period of time, and in fact, it's a constructive thing because you come back with a fresh eye, and things will change in 6, 7, 8 months. What's on your list? What do you reckon we're mucking up here?
I think infrastructure is a big one for me. I mentioned it in that article, and I grew up down in Endeavour Hills Way. My parents had bought in Endeavour Hills when it was a brand new estate and kind of no houses were built yet. So it was a beautiful place to live. But the further and further you go out there now, it's just these acre properties, or even if they were 1,000 square properties, are now plonking on 6 or 7 townhouses. The roads haven't improved at all, and they're one-lane roads. I lived in Patterson Lakes for a number of years, and that was Thompson's Road, 1 lane each way, and now they've finally started to extend that, but it's always catching its tail, and it's never going to catch up to itself. The more houses you put on small little blocks, townhouse, let's just say, has 3 or 4 people living in it. The kids grow up, get their Ps, that's 3 or 4 cars. Where are all these people going to drive? And you end up moving CBD-like traffic out to the suburbs, and it's no wonder people are stressed driving and there's road rage and all that. It's not an excuse, but you can see the correlation with it all.
The roads are clearly a big problem. I mean, in the places you've lived around the world, have you seen the answers?
I think some of the places I've lived, infrastructure with developers, there has to be a plan before you start. You start your subdivisions and your new suburbs and your boutique suburbs where you go to council, and there has to be some sort of plan formulated. You shouldn't build these housing estates and then be like, oh, hang on a second, we might need a petition to make this a 2-lane road. That should be done beforehand. Build your estates. Don't give the developers a license or a permit to build until things are rectified. So do it beforehand. And it delays the developer a year or two and they lose some money, so be it. They're going to make it at the back end. But I lived in LA the last 6 months, and you don't want to end up like that. I mean, it's yes. There is no. When I first got there, I asked, when's the commute into Staples Centre, when's it bad, and when's the traffic come out? Like, in Melbourne, it's before 9, and coming out, it's probably after 3:30, 4 o'clock. They're like, there is none.
It's bad all the time.
It's bad all the time. So you hear that, and it literally is, 12 miles, which is what, 16, 17 Ks. It's taken you an hour for me to get to Staples, which was just crazy. You don't want to end up like that.
Well, you know that part of town well. East-West Link, you seem fired up about that. Should have been built.
Well, yeah, we just lost money on it. And look, people think that I'm just smashing Andrew's government. Well, I am at the moment because they're the ones in. But don't mistake it for that any party's done well the last 10, 15 years, in my opinion. I think both sides are culpable. Our politicians, whether you're left, you're right, conservative, you're Greens, whatever you are, they have a lot to answer for. And it comes down with the rorting we've seen in the past. And it's just, when you're looking up to these people to uphold the law and put things into place, and they're not doing it themselves, there's a lot of questions in the air.
What about the city itself? How do you feel the city itself, the docklands and the rest of it?
I think it's beautiful. I don't spend a whole lot of time here, though, because I don't like the traffic and congestion. But look, for the facilities that we have, we're one of the best sporting capitals in the world, beautiful restaurants, cafes, laneway culture. I think it's beautiful. I wouldn't live in the city personally. That's by choice. I like being a bit out there a bit more with a bit more space, but I love to come in once or twice a month, maybe a little bit more, and catch up with a mate in a good restaurant. You can't beat it.
Crime?
I think it's an issue. I think it's always been an issue. The one that I struggle with is obviously, having some money, is driving a nice car and getting bumped or getting someone to follow you. I've given my wife the talk already about just be wary when you're in shopping centres and just be wary when you don't unlock the car from more than 10, 15 metres away. Try to just know your surroundings and be a bit more vigilant, and that's probably a conversation you don't want to have. but it's one you have to at the moment, and that's very unfortunate.
And that's not very Melbourne, is it?
It isn't. And look, we've always had crime. Let's not think it's just boom now. But I think the aggression of these crimes, the home invasions, are the ones that you really question, because you hear these elderly people that just get attacked and get belted with a bat, or 5 blokes standing over them. I think that's an issue that we need to fix. And I don't have the answer for that, but I think we all as a community need to come together and figure out a way on how to solve it, because it's not good for anybody. As I heard driving in here, the police are copping flack for police brutality. They're reacting the wrong ways, which there's never a right reason to go that hard on somebody. But at the same time, they probably had enough as well. So I think everybody needs to come together and figure out a way on how to solve this.
It's now accepted there's a specific problem with African crime, and I know a few African leaders who are trying to use sport to break through, specifically basketball, setting up little basketball clubs to try and get the kids off the street, get them involved. You seen that sort of thing work overseas?
Well, actually, a teammate of mine with the Los Angeles Lakers, Luol Deng, he's a Sudanese-born kid that grew up in England, and he comes out here every year and does a camp with the Sudanese kids, and we spoke about it a little bit, and he mentioned, a lot of these kids, they come over and they feel like they don't fit in culturally, and then they move to these suburbs once again, Neil, that build all these a plethora of houses in small little estates, no community centres, no real things for these kids to do, which is an excuse. I'm not advocating that that's an excuse to go out and do silly things, but he also said the reason why he comes back is because he wants to get these kids involved in something that's not just hanging out on a street corner, or not just causing trouble. So he's done a great job with that, and he has a huge camp every year, and he's coming out again, I think, in this winter, and I'm going to be a part of it hopefully when he comes out, because it's a great program. But it doesn't excuse what's going on. There should be no excuse for those brutal crimes, in my opinion.
What about trust? I mean, it strikes me, we've lost trust in the cricketers after what's happened in South Africa and before. We certainly lost trust in the politicians. The church is under question. The police are under question. The courts are under question. Nobody trusts the media. Have we lost all trust, do you think?
I think so. I think you're right. I don't remember a time like this, not in Australia anyway. I mean, in America, fair enough, with all the mishaps they've had the last decade. But I think it's hard to understand, like I said earlier, when politicians are the ones implementing policy and whatnot, and then they're the ones that are claiming helicopter rides to wineries or whatever they're doing. How do people then go to the booth and vote again? Constructively. A lot of people don't care. They go in there so they don't get fined, and they just they draw a picture on paper so they don't get fined, and that's not helping anybody neither. So I can see the frustration with people, and I'm not a regular Joe, obviously, because of my wealth, but I like to think that the people I hang out with on a regular basis are regular hard-working people who are just frustrated with the system.
Do you see a way of fixing it or changing?
I just think harsher penalties for pollies that do the wrong thing. I think there's, for an athlete, for instance, with you're caught cheating or performance-enhancing drugs, it's a one-strike policy. Give them a one-strike policy. If you knowingly do the wrong thing, I don't care what it is. If it's small or large, we're not going to sit here and debate, well, that wasn't as bad as what this bloke did. No, one-strike policy. You knowingly do something that's against the law that a regular Joe would get severely punished for, you're gone. You can't represent
Parliament.
Yeah, you can't represent our state again. There's no excuse for it. Even the thing with, I don't think it's a big deal with the dual citizenship thing, because I'm a dual citizen. But if that's a rule, that's when you started from day dot going to Parliament, you knew that was a rule, and you've broken it. See you later. Like why do politicians get a second chance or a third chance in that aspect? You should go back to the start of the line, and maybe you get to work your way back up in 5 or 10 years, but you're gone straight away.
Politics ever interest you?
People have asked me.
What, have they asked you to run?
No one's asked me to run. People have been.
That'll change today.
Yeah, people have tried to involve me into joining their party or putting a word out for their party. But like I said, I'm not all in with one party. I'm just not. I like policies from the left. I like policies from conservatives, and whatnot. But I get labelled right wing a lot because I'm big on personal responsibility, and I'm big on. I don't like the PC culture of the left. But Neil, I grew up a wog, so I don't think the right's going to like me very much. The far right's not going to really like a guy. The far right Australian's not going to really like a guy with a wog background, unfortunately. So that's when I laugh at that. But to go to one specific party, I'm not sure I could at this point.
Did you carry a burden growing up as a wog?
I did. I had a chip on my shoulder from it, and I kind of used it to my advantage, which helped me through my sports career.
How did you suffer? Did people harass you?
I was called a wog through our high school, and I'm born in Australia, and you can't always blame people who are uneducated, and and people aren't the smartest when it comes to, especially kids. Kids are harsh, you know how it is with kids. They're direct, but they hear that from their parents or their family members. But my father copped way worse than I did. I mean, he got expelled in what was it, year 8 or 9? Got caught a wog-based PE teacher, knocked him out, and then did the same thing with his principal and had a swing at him, and he was gone. He was working in a factory by year 9, year 10, but grinded out a great living for the family and did really well. But you hear it growing up, and you kind of, it just, the Nick Giannopoulos thing, you ended up saying, all right, if I'm a wog, I'm a wog. Cool. Yeah. But then when I made when I made the NBA, I was battling Aussie straight away, so it is what it is.
You're a big man to be insulted even as a child. You're big. Did you ever resort to violence?
Had a few tussles in high school. I got, the problem with me was that I got hassled a lot by much older kids because I was so tall. But I was skinny. I was a rake. I mean, I was at 1.66 and 85 kilos. So, I was a rail. But I've been through some scuffles. I, got jumped by a gang of gews when I was about 15 years old and almost broke my arm in a scuffle and just got absolutely pummeled and belted walking into a party. So I can relate to a lot of these issues that are ongoing right now directly because I've been involved in it, and that's what people don't know. They always say, "Oh, you're a millionaire basketballer, shut up." But no, I've lived this throughout my childhood. Yeah,
and you grew up in an area which is now considered one of the hotspots.
It is, and it hurts me to see it. Look, Dandenong was never the Bel Air of Victoria, but it was starting to get better when I was younger. And it was a place like going from Endeavour Hills, you'd go to the Dandenong Plaza, and that's kind of the place you went for your shopping and your restaurants and all that if you didn't want to go to the city. And I mean, I don't really want to venture there too much. Driving through there, there's some spots there that are pretty rough.